Our very special distinguished guest, Tony Miller, who is the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Education. Tony, thank you so much for coming. Our school feels so honored to have you, and the fact that you selected Evansville as one of your stops has been very special for us. Also, Dennis Van Rokel, President of the NEA. Our own David Smith, Superintendent of the Evansville-Vandenberg School Corporation. And last but not least, Keith Gamble, the President of our Teachers Association. At this time, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Tony Miller.
And it works? Great. Well, thank you for that very warm welcome, and really, it's both a pleasure and an honor to be here. I'm somewhat familiar with the area, having gone to college at Purdue University in West Lafayette. Grew up in Peoria, Illinois, so I'm back to my roots in the Midwest, and as you're driving cross country in a bus, right, you got a whole different appreciation for kind of what real America is, and it was heartening to be on the bus today, and I'm really glad to be here with you all tonight. I'm going to keep my remarks fairly brief, so we can have more of an exchange and a question and answer. But the question that's been coming up, throughout the day, it's like, well, why are you doing the trip? And in particular, now that you're in Evansville, why are you here? And let me just give it some context. We all recognize that the importance of education has never been greater. Never been greater. And one of the things I do in my role is I travel all around the world looking at education systems all around the world. And you look at how nations and nation states are really investing in improving their education system. So you go to Singapore, Hong Kong, Japan, China, Shanghai, and Beijing. You say, wow, there's some impressive work being done. And you realize that as the percentage of our young adults, we've fallen behind. We no longer lead the world in terms of those who not only graduate high school, but they go on to get some kind of post-secondary degree. If you look at how our 15-year-olds are doing, you realize that oftentimes we're not as competitive, especially when you move into the math and science. And so there really is this call to action of, okay, what are we doing in this country to improve it? And we've been committed as an administration, and Arnie's just passionate about, we've got to improve education for all. And all means all kids and all communities. And that really is how we're going to sustain our economic growth. That's how we're going to preserve our national security. And that's how we're going to preserve our citizenship, our spirit of democracy, by making sure we have a really educated student and continuing adult population. So with that, one of the things you look around and you say, boy, we've got some challenging situations out there. In some communities, we have schools that are not educating students to the highest level. And there's a whole host of reasons. And people say, well, do you just wring your hands or can something be done? And it's coming to Evansville, it's coming to this school, and you see what is the art of the possible. When you have committed leadership, right, at the school level, supported by committed leadership, at the district level, supported by national leadership, and supported by resources. And I think that's what you have here represented tonight in terms of federal government trying to provide resources. So we say, how can we take some of our most academically struggling schools, put resources in place to help turn around their performance? You take the partnership of NEA, Dennis Van Rokel, saying, how can we identify priority schools, focus schools that we're going to put resources behind and really bring the professional development and support to make a difference? How do you have district leadership that says, all too often you have school principals and teachers saying, boy, the district is part of the problem, not part of the solution. But here you say, no, we've got a partner in district leadership. And we're all too often, and my sister who's a teacher in Detroit Public Schools say, too often teachers are seen as part of the problem when the reality is we are and we are going to be part of the solution. How do you get the leadership, right, of the teachers to say, yes, we are part of this? And I think where we are here tonight is a great example of a community coming together and demonstrating real performance improvement in a relatively short period of time. And it really says this is how we are going to regain our competitiveness globally by investing in education, by bringing together communities and leaders. So it's very inspiring. It's a story that will take not just back to DC, but across the country as we tell the story. I want to commend the leadership here on the stage tonight and talk more about what have been some of the challenges, some of the lessons learned, and how can we kind of take this to scale across the country. So thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tony. I appreciate you being here, and I think you should know you took your life into your own hands because we have a lot of IU fans right there. So, but we'll be with you. I want to talk a little bit tonight about the initiatives that we've undertaken with our teachers, with our community, that have brought us to where we are at this point in time. But before I do that, I really want to thank Glenwood Leadership Academy, Tamara, all of your staff. I'm blessed to work with an incredible school board who are passionate about kids in Evansville and always look to do what's right, not necessarily what's easy, but what is right. And the talented staff of Glenwood Leadership Academy. I'm humbled and honored to be in your presence tonight. I want to take just a few minutes to talk about some of the initiatives, and these are not initiatives to add to somebody's resume to make that look impressive. These are initiatives that are undertaken to make certain that our students have the best possibility of an incredibly bright life. When we talk about data, we've invested in a data warehouse. So we have data galore, and we can mine data. We can tell you things that I never had access to as a teacher just a few years back. And then we also have data wise, which is a process, a continuous improvement process. So we can take that data, put it into that data wise process, and actually then enact certain strategies based on what the information tells us that each and every child needs. And that's incredibly important. We also have been held up as a national model for the family and full service community partnerships that we have. And Kathy Gray and the work that she does, held up on a national stage. We know that families are incredibly important in the life of each and every child. We also have our equity school model, which has been heralded as a national model. And really that brings together everyone that is keenly invested in the child's life, gives our outstanding teachers and leadership the autonomy to make decisions, site-based decisions, based on the needs of their kids and their families, and it works. And it works because of the type of intense effort that not what central office has put into this, but what our teachers and our staff and our leadership has taken on. And that really very bold initiative. And then yesterday we announced a 3-year partnership with Mass Insight, and we have some of our friends from Mass Insight here tonight. I'm incredibly excited about that. And some people have said that that's just a bold initiative, and I don't know that it's bold. I think it's the right thing to do. We're not afraid to look at ourselves and say, what can we do better? I will tell you one thing, Evansville, Indiana is not concerned about the status quo. We're concerned about the future. And we will do everything possible to make certain that we, using the expertise of others and our skills and our abilities, to make certain that, once again, our students are put in the best environment possible. I was asked to talk a little bit tonight about collaboration and how does collaboration work in Evansville. And driving over, I kind of had a change of heart. I'll talk just a little bit about collaboration, but then I'll tell a story, if I may. Collaboration here really is based on trust. I trust Dan and Keith. I trust our teachers. I trust the people that are charged with working with our kids each and every day. And I have tremendous respect for Dan and Keith, for our Teachers Association, for our professional staff, for our non-certified staff, for our employees. And then there's communication. That really is the glue that holds everything together. And I think we also hold ourselves accountable. And all of that's incredibly important. None of that works, however, if you don't take the time and invest in relationships. and you have to be in this work for the long haul. But now I really want to talk about the meat and potatoes of this. I want to talk about my tie. We'll see if this works.
Okay.
Somebody asked me, so are you wearing that red tie to make a statement? And I thought, really? I'm wearing red, white, and blue. And that's the statement I want to make. I want to make the statement that I am a public school superintendent who every day gets to do something noble and worthy, and that's helping kids have incredible outcomes so they can have an incredible life. But if you want to pick out one aspect, if you want to pick out a tie, the red, and think that I'm making a statement, then I think you're missing the fact that it's the whole thing. Too often, we allow people to pick out one element and pick away and pick away and pick away. When the United States of America was founded to be united, and it's only in being united will we make the types of positive change our students deserve. So thank you for being here tonight.
Well, I thought I was invited here tonight because I was president of NEA, but now I understand if you don't grow up in the Midwest, you don't get on stage. And I grew up in Iowa, just down the road a piece, so I guess that's why I got to be here. I'm always proud to be introduced as president of NEA, but in my real life, I'm a high school math teacher, did that for 23 years. But my work at NEA, and the reason I'm here in Evansville is because, I don't know if you know this, but I talk about y'all everywhere I go. All across this country, I bring up this town, this school corporation, and what you're doing. Let me explain why. David said it so well. We're not interested in the status quo. The way it is right now in this country is absolutely not acceptable. We graduate about 75% of our kids in this nation. If you're Hispanic or African American, it's closer to 50%. And it's not like this fluctuates. It's not like the Dow Jones average. Every single year, we have the same results. And what you have to realize is, unless you change that system, those results will continue. And why, in the richest, most powerful nation in the world, we would tolerate results like that, especially in the 21st century, when we know what has to happen for kids, is just wrong. So as an organization, we care very deeply about how do you change the system. And although some believe and constantly look for this silver bullet, this one thing that you change, they notice one thing, and they think if we just do this one thing, everything will be okay. We don't believe that. We believe that it is a system and it takes everybody in there. It is a shared responsibility, and it is a shared dream of what ought to be. So what others call persistently low-performing schools, we call priority schools. We say they ought to be a priority. And Tony and the Secretary of Education, Arnie Duncan, have been such great partners in figuring out how to really make a difference. That it's not an easy solution, it's a tough problem. And where the department and NEA totally agree is that if you really want to change that system and have sustained change, you have to work together. You have to have collaboration. So we try and model that at the national level, and Evansville, what you're doing here is not the norm. You may think you're just average middle class, middle America school corporation. You're not. What you're doing is absolutely incredible because you are bringing together all aspects: management, the administration, school board, employees and their union, reaching out to parents in the community and say, let's figure out what we have to do differently to change what's happening to our kids in our community. And that is what I believe is so important that we do in this nation. And what I brag about are the kinds of things that David talked about, the kinds of things that you're doing on an ongoing basis. Now, it'd be nice if you could solve it in 2 hours like in a movie. You know, I always love movies about education. No matter how bad the situation, graffiti on the walls, drug deals in the hallway, fights, and in about 2 hours, it's all solved. because the movie's over and they wrote the script. It isn't that way in real life. And what we have to do is to work together to make that happen. So NEA is very proud to be a partner, along with the Indiana State Teachers Association, and we have the president here tonight, along with the local association president, with all of you to say, let's sit down together at a table, identify what it is we want for our children, and let's do it together to find a way to make a difference. So I'm really pleased to be here, and I've learned so much today as I've talked to people and asked questions and listened. And I'm honored to be on stage with Tony and the Department of Education, because I also believe that if we can't make those connections, we're never really going to make the sustained effort to change that entire system. So thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the questions that you all have for Tony. We have an agreement that the hard ones go to him and I get the easy ones, and Keith and David can take the other hard ones. So thank you very much for having me.
Note to self, do not agree to be the last to speak, especially after these three. I will have to agree with Dennis. I wanted to know what Whoopi Goldberg had in that furniture polish where she took the broken down piano and turned it into a beautiful baby grand in the middle of Sister Act. Like, I need that can of furniture polish. I want to echo David's thanks to Glenwood and their staff here who have been so accommodating, as well as the support staff within EVSC that have helped bring all of this together. Certainly one of the hardest working school secretaries in EVSC. Thank you so much for what you have done. Yesterday at the press conference for welcoming in Mass Insight, I opened with, we do things a little different in Evansville. And I say that because I've had the opportunity to travel to other school districts and see some of the obstacles that they're facing. And I reflect on what we do, and I referred to it yesterday as just common sense. Why would the superintendent and the head of the Teachers Association not sit down and just have a dialogue? Surely our end result, what we're desiring, is the same. And so how can we partner together to make sure that we can get there the easiest way possible? And I think that has been the philosophy that we've tried to embrace here in Evansville. And through that, we have been able to honor the expertise that lives inside our classrooms. So many school districts are looking for that next great program that they can bring in and lay upon their school district. And as the fads change, then so too does the next program that they bring in. And when we recognize that we have hardworking, well-trained individuals in our school system, we have to invest in that expertise, recognize that, and honor that, shepherd that along so that we are able to provide the best education for the children we serve. I appreciated what, Tony, you said, that it is also about the greater community. And certainly the Glenwood community is that such a place. In an article for the NEA Priority Schools, I was quoted as saying, anyone that would have looked at Glenwood just a few short years ago, their estimate would be close the doors and send the students to another school. But the city had a commitment to this neighborhood. And along with that, the school district made a commitment to this neighborhood and this community that we are not going to run away from the problems that are here. We're going to face them, and we're going to find the way out. And we have stayed committed to that. And if you look at the things that are happening around here, and you look at the community partnerships, and certainly Kathy helped shepherd along the USI link with the Community Health Center that is a part of this facility. And those type of programs that we're able to bring in and invest in the community here, and then also able to take what we learn here and spread that out across the district. It should not be that we have just one light here, but we want that light to spread throughout our school district. I'm honored that you all are here and appreciate your service to us and helping us along the way. But at the same time, I'm at times puzzled because I think, well, why isn't everyone doing this type of work? And so I do thank you for being here and for helping tell our story that's going on, and I certainly hope that it helps other school districts across the state and nation as we move the work forward. Certainly, one of the things that I was also supposed to talk about was our community partnerships, and I think this relationship that we have, when the school district sets itself up to say, look, we are all in this together. We have all of our employees together on this. The ability for communities to come in and say, I want to be a part of that is stronger than ever. And certainly our school community council and all of the members of that certainly bode well to the work that we're doing. Thank you.
So with that, we just open it up to questions from the floor.
Well, look at you.
Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, Joe.
Joe, who are you?
Hi, I'm late. My name is Joe Anderson. I work with the Department, the U.S. Department of Education, Senior Advisor to the Secretary. Just coming from a meeting, conversation with a number of teachers, administrators in Mount Vernon, Illinois. So it's a pleasure to be here and help facilitate at this late point.
Good to have you, Joe.
Hi, I'm a parent here at Glenwood Leadership Academy. I know this school provides lots of services that other schools don't offer, which is because of the extra money from the federal grant. The funding will be ending this year, and I was wondering what or if any plans do you have to help our school?
Yeah, so assuming you're talking about at the federal level, so I'll go first. I think this is it's a concern that we're hearing all around the country. The school improvement grant money, the initial grant was roughly $4 billion, and it was on top of the normal annual appropriations, right, which represented a dramatic investment to really target the schools that were persistently low achieving or priority schools and really provide the resources. The reality is that it's got a life to it, and what we're trying to do right now is fight for additional money and additional programs. I will tell you, with the tone of the fiscal environment in Washington, D.C. and the budget negotiations, I think we have to be, frankly, not especially optimistic that we're going to get significant funding. And so one of the things we're trying to do is, one, we're going to still fight for new funding, and the president every year in his budget has fought for funding in education, and we continue to fight for funding for the school improvement grant program. So that's one thing we're trying to do. The other thing we're trying to do, and David and others, is we're trying to make sure that we align our different programs such that we have a common definition so that resources can be deployed and redeployed to support these programs. And so, for example, in the waivers for ESEA, we said, okay, how do we kind of make sure that we have an accountability regime that's consistent with some of the principles on our school turnaround program that allows then more flexibility about how you're going to direct resources. And in that case, in the state's accountability system, some of the resources that are freed up, could they be used to support these kinds of programs? Those are some of the things we're trying to do from a pure financial resources. I think the reality, though, is if you say there's going to be less resources, what we have to challenge ourselves, and we have to challenge kind of districts and states, is to say, of the existing resources out there, right, how do we really kind of line item by line item really assess, are we really getting the bang for the buck on these resources? And where we are, we should dedicate towards them, and where we're not, we should shift it for these kinds of programs. given the results we're having, I would say these are the kinds of programs, the kind of intervention, data-wise, database, these are the kind of things we need to find funding for. And so that's just got to be part of prioritization discussions. What we're committed to do, whether we have funding or not, is to start saying, where we have capabilities, where we have lessons learned, the Glenwood story, we say these are the approaches. How, in fact, can we take those and keep people from reinventing the wheel? So that way, as they do take these things, you can do it more cost effectively. So how do you build the capacity? That's through our technical assistance and support. So that's what we're going to be able to invest in, even if we don't get program grant money. But we're still going to try to fight for additional resources to really fund the kind of and sustain the interventions that are needed.
Thank you. And thank you for the question. It's a question that I ask myself on nearly a daily basis. We've absorbed $22.5 million worth of lost revenue since 2010. That's a big number. It really represents more than 10% of our operating budget for a year. So what we need to do, exactly what Tony said, is we need to look at the data to see what works and then make certain that we sustain what is working. We also, just to put several ideas out in the audience, we also have an operational excellence initiative, really one of only 2 in the United States in a K-12 setting. And operational excellence really is looking to eliminate waste and being as efficient as we can possibly be, so we continue to drive resources into the classroom, because we know that's where the resources need to be. Also, when you think about our early childhood initiative, that's incredibly important, but that takes over $1 million of our Title I funding, because the state of Indiana is one of 7 in the state that doesn't think kids are important enough to be funded at the state level when they're ages 0 to 5, even though 85% of their brain development occurs during that time. That is a travesty. And really, just one final comment. As many of you in the audience know, we've initiated an RTI, response to intervention process, because we know that works. When we did a peer analysis of school corporations across our nation that are seeing that breakthrough performance, that was a common element. And really, response to intervention is putting supports down at the very basic level, the beginning levels, to make certain that you don't have to fix problems that are there early on. It's interesting, Toyota Motor Manufacturing of Indiana, just right down the road, when they have a problem in their automobile, early in the stages of the assembly line, do they let that automobile go all the way through and then fix the problem at the end? Absolutely not. They fix it when it starts. I would love to see a time in this great country of ours when we invest more in our schools at the bottom than in our prisons to try to resolve community ills.
That's our next question.
I just want to add, I just want to add to this, one of David's comments, is the fact that we've had $22 million in cuts, but the state's got a $1.2 billion surplus. And to me, that's the travesty, because those dollars can be used in our schools to help these programs be realized.
And if I might add, this is something I think that really shows where our heart and passion is for our kids. Not one single teacher job has been lost through $22 million in cuts.
I'm Don Counts, and last year my great-grandson started kindergarten, and I was amazed and would like to compliment the school corporation and Cedar Hall because of what all that he learned and all the things that he did, that he was having to change classes for music, gym, science, and math. And I was amazed that he even had science and math in kindergarten. And this year in the first grade, he's learning Spanish. So they're doing an amazing job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow.
kindergarten. I'm a parent here. I have 4 children that attend, and I know a lot of you guys are talking on a national level and on the school district level, and I just wanted to say that there's a big difference between our teachers and our staff here that you don't see at other schools. There's more of a family feeling to it, and I'm really proud that my kids go here.
Oh, wow.
If I could with that, because I appreciate what you have to say about that, and I believe that each school works to create that family feeling. One of the things that I am most disappointed in at the state level is with the new restrictions that they are putting on our ability to collectively bargain, is that all of the language that is in our contract that has created the equity school model, that got all of this started, all of that language that is a part of our contract, when our contract expires in 2014, will be illegal for the district to bargain ever again. And I think it's a real shame that when this community has shown that collectively bargaining a contract can produce wonderful things for the children, that to then suddenly make that action illegal is certainly not doing a service for the children that we are serving. So thank you so much for your comments, and I know that the staff at GLA is very thankful for your support.
Can I maybe pose, is there another question? Okay. While we're maybe moving to that one, can I go back to the question around sustainability and ask both Dennis and Keith, I mean, in these difficult financial times, how do you see, Keith and Dennis, through the collaboration that you're promoting nationally and doing so well locally, what are some ways do you think that teachers and the association and the district can work together to deal with some of these issues so that it's a shared?
At the local level, there are a few things that are happening. First of all, our association invests in our members. We have a scholarship program that teachers can apply into for professional development outside of the school district. We have an initiative that allows teachers to partner with one another so that if someone's doing something new and innovative in their classroom, I can get in to see that happening. So we're investing in our own members in that. Also, the work that we're doing collectively with the school district, when we invest in the personnel that's here, we can then systemically continue that drive as long as we have the resources to maintain the staff that we have, because we are recognizing the talent that's here and helping them to train up the next generation of teachers to follow.
What I would add is I talk to leaders all across this country. The question you ask is on the front page of everyone's mind about how do we sustain the work that we've started, some of it through school improvement grants and other programs. As I listen, I think one of the things you're modeling here is the relationships that are being built. There are no easy answers to that. We will continue to fight for increased funding at the federal and at the state level. But it's really much of what you have to do within the framework you're given. That will happen better with collaboration than any other way. If there's just one group who's saying, we figured out the right answer and then tells everyone, it won't work. We've had that demonstrated all over this country time and time again. So what's happening right here, I believe, is the answer. It is the best answer that, under the circumstances you're in, doesn't mean you don't stop fighting like crazy to bring additional resources to provide kids what they need. But each and every year with where you are, you sit down together and say, how do we best deliver what we know that kids need? I want to add one thing to what David said about early childhood. There's not a piece of evidence anywhere that doesn't demonstrate the power and the potential of early childhood development. It is absolutely irrefutable that that is the best investment any nation can make. Finland, which is now held up around the world as the leader, in 1990, they were not number one in the world. And they had less than 40% of their children in early childhood education. Today, it's about 96%, and they're number one in the world. That isn't coincidence. And the hardest part about advocating for that in the public arena is that you're asking policymakers who have 2-year or 4-year terms, or 6 in Congress or in Senate, to make an investment of resources that they will not see the results during their term. It's down the road, but yet that is the most important one. And so I think what you're doing here with what you have, sitting down together and say, we've got to figure out a way to make sure that we address as many resources as we can to the issues that we know work. Data collection is easy. Data analysis is more difficult. Taking into and say, looking at it and say, what is the best way, based on this information, for us to proceed with the greatest benefit for kids? So we can't stop fighting at the national level. It saddens me that during this economic crisis, which is a worldwide, it's not just here in the United States and obviously not just in Indiana. The United States is one of the only countries that decreased investment in education. Some held it constant, but many more increased investment in education during this time, recognizing that the only way to real economic security is by investing in the next generation who must lead us. So there's so much you're doing right at the local level. We just need to do a better job of advocating at the national and get those resources.
You know, if I may, and you've been very patient to stand back there for just 12 minutes now. But, but if I could, I want to put forward what sounds simple in theory, may be difficult to implement in practice, but we receive a lot of different pots of money from both the federal and state levels. But with those pots of money come an equally voluminous pile of regulations with which we must comply. So I would suggest, in advocacy for our nation's youth, that basically what you do is you decide by whatever formula you presently have in place how much money we are to receive, remove the restrictions, give us the money to spend as we see fit according to the community's needs, and then hold me accountable for that. But it is somewhat akin to, in our household budgets, having budget for food, having budget for electricity, and having budget for cable TV. And you have money in the budget for cable TV, but you're out of your budget for utilities, and you don't have the authority or the means necessary to take your cable TV money and put it in to keep your utility bills running so you could even have cable TV. That's what we're faced with. Remove the restrictions and hold us accountable.
Your turn.
I'm Kimmy. I'm a student here at Glenwood Leadership Academy, and I have to agree with this parent from Glenwood that we are like a family, and that I guarantee like 100% that every student here at Glenwood Leadership Academy has a relationship with a staff member or a teacher. And I was wondering, what can we do for the teachers, because they work like really hard every day, and no teacher has ever said that they do this for the money. So I was wondering what we can like give back to them.
Well, we can start by first recognizing the GLA staff. So if they would stand up, and we can start by recognizing them right now. Second, I would say make sure that all your homework's ready for tomorrow. Sorry.
You know, until we receive more money, here, my wife is a teacher. You know, here's what you can do to pay a teacher back. Make your life incredibly great.
Could I also suggest another thing to do is think about becoming a teacher yourself?
Amen.
But, and I wasn't finished. Seriously, live your life. Live your life so that you never have to apologize for anybody or to anybody for actions that would be put in the paper. And then anytime you hear somebody denigrate teachers or denigrate kids that go to Glenwood or denigrate Glenwood families, don't allow them to do it.
You know, I know Tony's got to leave fairly quickly with the bus. Can I ask follow up on that question around really the comment I think Dave made about the many different funding streams and simplifying that? I know that's some things that the department's been working on. Do you want to talk about that? How we're trying to make it easier for that kind of flexibility, Tony?
Yeah, as you said, it's easy to say, it's hard to do, but it's something that, but that's what GLA has done, right? It's easy to say, take a challenging environment and then turn it around, but that's what GLA has done. So we've got to hold ourselves up to that same level of effort. So there's a host of things we're trying to do. We realize that there's a lot of compliance activity that can be costly and burdensome, and it's not clear what the real benefit is. And so what we are trying to do is systematically say, okay, what compliance activity is required, and there are some reasons for it, but where we can be more flexible, let's be more flexible, and let's ensure that we are reducing the burden. So at the highest level, one of the things we've been trying to do, and at the core is with the ESA flexibility, would be one classic example, is where under the current law, No Child Left Behind, folks are probably familiar with, that if you're not meeting certain requirements, actually it's very prescriptive about what are the interventions that need to be taken, right? Irrespective of those are the right interventions for this school. And our view is that we need to provide much more flexibility and leave those decisions to the states and to the districts, and actually freeing up resources. So in this case, states like Indiana, who've gotten the waiver, we've got 33 states now, 11 that we're still working with, so you know, could be 90 to hopefully at some point 100% of states where we're saying, we at the federal government are actually going to be providing you more flexibility around resources. In this case, it's Title I monies associated with interventions, associated with mandated tutoring. Not that we think tutoring is bad. Arnie says it all the time. You know, his mother was, you know, provided tutoring. He grew up in that. So we think tutoring could be the right solution in the right circumstance. But that requires high quality tutoring, and it requires the right circumstance. We can't prescribe from Washington, D.C. that that's going to be the case. And so that's a classic example. We're saying, hey, we need to be able, let's think about this differently. Let's be really clear about what the end goal is. You need to have accountability system. You need to make sure that all students are learning and that students don't fall through the cracks. But how we get there and what's working, leave more of those kinds of decisions to the states in collaboration with their districts. So that's kind of a prime example of philosophically how it's translating into a program. I think the other things we're trying to do is, frankly, we're trying to bring together, and for us, especially at a state level, more coordination. And so we have Title I, Title II, Title III, right? All right, dedicated funding streams, but frankly, oftentimes administered separately and distinctly. That's mirrored at the state level, and it's translated when it gets down to a district level. So why is that? Title I, typically for poor kids, right, are often some of the same kids that are receiving Title III. And what are the interventions? It's associated with the professional development oriented to those kids, which Title II is. And so what we're doing is thinking through new organizational models within the Department of Education, where we're actually organizing around state desks. I'm not going to get into all the details, but just to tell you, to provide an example of, we're trying to change our orientation to say it's not about these dedicated funding streams, but it really is about a kind of coordinated approach. We're starting to reorganize around state models. We're going to try to drive more coordination across the different funding streams, and with the hope that that's going to cascade down. And then lastly, in the context of the ESCA reauthorization, that's when you can really start tackling some of these things. When you get to the core, the real core issues, let's say around Title I, it's around supplement but not supplant, right? And so these requirements right now that are kind of baked into the law, that there's been a lot of feedback that says the intent is understandable. The intent is to say if these resources are meant to close the achievement gap for those that have been historically disadvantaged and currently disadvantaged, right? How do you make sure that those funds serve that purpose? But I think many would say it's incredibly burdensome, and sometimes it's at cross purposes. So why can't we be more flexible, be more focused on outcomes, and provide more flexibility with less strings? And so those are the types of things we're considering, so that when we can go back to a Congress that can ultimately take on reauthorization, we can start considering even more flexibility. But we're committed to doing something in the near term with like ESCA flexibility. We're committed in the near term to start changing our organizational approach and have that kind of play into the state. And we're committed to the medium and long term to get at the fundamental things that we think that frankly impede some of the progress that we all would like to make.
I would applaud, my name is Dan Hartz, and I would applaud the federal government from looking at the ability to make the guidelines flexible. But I also think that it is inherently a problem when the states that see the flexibility at the federal level then clamp down and create more hoops to jump through so that the flexibility never gets to this school. And that's exactly what's happened in Indiana.
And I'm not opposed to the federal government going straight to us.
And I apologize because I'm going to have to make my transition. Joe, continue. Let me just say to that
question though first.
Thanks.
Yeah, don't wait for Joe.
No, I guess two things. One, we are mindful, right? And we've tried to make it clear, and in both our message and we're trying to do in our follow-up, to say the intent was to provide flexibility locally. And to the degree that states are just imposing their own set of mandates instead of the federal government, it defies the logic of, if you really want to have interventions that are tailored locally, and that's why we're doing it at the federal level, it's unclear how the state mandating it across the whole state, how that would be the right solution, right? What's right on average for Indiana may not be right for Evansville. And so we are watching that, and we're trying. That said, we're also very mindful of respectful of states' rights in this. I mean, and so it is a fine balance to say we have to respect states and their ability to govern the education system, but we do have an intent here. So that's the first thing. The second part, now I've forgotten the second part of the response.
That really was the primary question, and you answered it. Thank you.
Great. Well, with that, again, let me thank you for allowing me to join you tonight. And again, I really want to both recognize and applaud what you're doing here. This notion of collaboration that Dennis talks about, I mean, this is not easy stuff. No. I mean, it really is not easy stuff. We've got too many stakeholders, right? and oftentimes it seemed to have a vested interest in the status quo and not embracing kind of, we know what needs to be done, right? We just need to be committed to students and to student achievement and to be respectful of one another and to truly collaborate, and we can do a lot. That's what we've tried to model at the national level, right? The collaboration with secretary, with Dennis, with leadership. That's what you're seeing here modeled here locally with district leadership, with teachers here, with administrators here, and extending into the community. And I think, and I couldn't agree more, that is the only way we're going to move at the pace and scale that we need if we're really going to significantly improve education in this country, which is an absolute imperative. So again, I want to commend you. We'll continue to tell the GLA story, and thank you for sharing tonight with us.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
While Tony has to leave, I think the rest of us are able to stay and continue answering some questions if there are more questions or comments that people want. Do we have the mic there? Right.
My name is Lisa Bagelin, and I am a TAP mentor teacher here at Glenwood Leadership Academy. And I know there's so much research from Harvard University and numerous other studies that say that one of the biggest factors that impacts student academic success is that of having high-quality teachers. And having a good teacher for 3 or more consecutive years can make all the difference in the world. Knowing that, and this being a priority school, are there insights, suggestions, recommendations of things that we can look at so that we can maintain and attract and retain our quality teachers here so that they're not moving out? Teaching is hard work anywhere, but when you're in a priority school, it's really hard work. So any insights on what we can do to retain and attract those quality teachers here for the kids here as well, because they deserve it just as much as the other kids.
I'm a little concerned about the direction that Indiana is going with this, because I see their philosophy as we are going to fire our way to success. With the method that they have and the way that they want to attach items onto how they value teachers in complete unreasonable ways, I think is really disheartening first, but is tragic to the commitment that the teachers are making in these schools and in these communities. And I find it very disheartening, and it is certainly what keeps me going in the role that I am, and that is that constant fighting for what I know that the staff at GLA are doing, and I know that the staff across EVSC are doing, and that they are giving their heart and soul to this profession. It is one that I believe that we are called into doing. And I know that you are servant providers to our students. And I find it disheartening, the direction that we are going. Too often we're always looking for someone to blame instead of saying, let's find a solution to move forward. And I think that we've been in a situation where we want to just blame the teachers for what is going on. And I hope that we continue to shine a light on all of the great work that is going on, not just here, but in all of our schools, and as an effort to really say, we are investing in our teachers, and we know that what they're doing is right and good, and keep that story moving forward.
Let me add to that. We've done polling of our members, over 3 million people and we ask questions like that. What would entice you to go to schools that have some of the biggest challenges? The number one thing that comes back is school leadership. They want good leadership, principle, that brings people together. Their second thing is they say, we want to do this together. We don't want to pit one against the other. We want to do this together for all of our kids. Those are the top two. And see, I think what many of the things you're doing here help enable that. I really was moved by both the parent and the student talking about the deep caring and the community. That's huge. Because when you're part of that and you're working together to define what we believe collectively needs to be done that will help the students, that is a powerful, not only motivator for doing it, but I believe it'll always work. I was saying to David this afternoon, my dream, if I could wave my magic wand, would be to enable all of the adults who work in any school of America to spend 4 weeks together before the school year starts. And to look at that data and say, let's look at where our kids are. Let's talk about that vision of where we'd like them to be. And then together say, what is it that we believe we should do this year to make the biggest difference? If we could choose 3 or 4 or 5 things, or whatever the number is, what are the 3 most important things that we could do more of, less of, or differently that we believe will help our students? Whatever answer they come up with, I believe will work. Because number one, you're tapping into that professional knowledge in that building of the adults who see those kids. And I'm talking more than teachers. I'm talking every adult who works in there, because they all are part of that. Some of the adults who most touch a student's life, maybe it's a bus driver who takes them to school, maybe it's someone who works in the lunchroom, maybe it's a school secretary, maybe it's a para. It's adults who work in that building have a way, and when you bring them together to decide collectively what the answer is, it works. So that's my magic wand, to allow every school to have that time together to decide for themselves what they believe will work. And that's what draws people there. It's a sense of community, that you're not there alone. Nothing is worse than being in, first of all, school that has a lot of challenges, and then you feel like you're all by yourself. It's discouraging, and people want to go where there's a sense of belonging and believing together that you can make a difference. So I think you're on that road. And as I said at the beginning, it'd be nice if we could do it with a script and it's done in 2 hours, but you got to start somewhere. One of the things I asked Keith and David today as I was talking to them is, as I go around the country there, I hear people say, we want to do that too. What should we do first? And from both of them, they said, if you can't build the relationships first, whatever activity you do isn't that important. You've got to be able to build that relationship. David said of trust and of working together to say that it really is about the student. I get tired of people talking about student-centered and then they don't really think about the student. Student-centered to me is looking at students of where they are and where you hope they to be, and then defining the obstacles that are there and then saying, so what do we do about those? One of the things is health. And I know you've really done some work in bringing healthcare into schools. The number one reason in America for absence in elementary school is asthma. Now, if diagnosed and treated, that's manageable in almost all cases. So why in the world do we have literally thousands of kids who are missing out on days and days of school because no one has the foresight to say, let's diagnose what's stopping them from being at school and solving that. So I think you are doing what needs to be done to create that atmosphere of community and collective responsibility for the kids. So I salute actually what you're doing, and we ought to tell more people in this country that they ought to follow what you're doing.
And Lisa, if I could just for a second. You know, Tamara, she probably won't appreciate me saying that, but this, I'm going to do it anyway. Tamara worked in her central office for several years, right? And when I asked her to come to Glenwood this year, I don't know that everybody from a central office perspective would embrace that. But I tell you what, if you have the opportunity to write down and script how it should be done, she did it. You know, and interestingly enough, I think, without a doubt, one of your mentors is Sheila Huff. And you want to talk about, when I heard about the assembly that you had here, where there was a special guest, and it was Sheila, and the electricity that was in, and you're all smiling now. I'm not making this stuff up. You can't manufacture that, and it can't be fake. It's genuine. And if you don't have a passion, you don't belong here. And obviously, you've got the passion, and it is tough. So there are some things that we need to do. One may be to insulate you from many things that are thrust upon you, and perhaps compensation. I know that some folks think that that's the end-all and be-all, but I want to make certain that each and every school has veteran teachers that have the capacity to mentor younger teachers, and that we can learn from one another. So I applaud what you're doing here. I know you had tremendous growth in scores last year, and I will be here to celebrate with you when you have tremendous scores again this year.
We've talked a lot about resource alignment tonight, and I think it would be remiss of me, for those of you that are not from Evansville or don't hear these conversations all the time that are in this audience, not to say that the miracle of this school is not the money that's been here. The miracle of this school is the way the community, the Evansville-Vandenberg School Corporation, the City of Evansville, and all of the partners, which I cannot name now because I will leave someone out, have come around this school and said, we believe in you. We know that you can do it. That, coupled with the commitment of those folks there, that's what's changing Glenwood Leadership Academy. Having said that, it's important to say, even though the money is not the miracle, it's helpful. Right? It makes things easier. There are certain things, resource alignment in a building like ours cannot be the same as it is in other places. And so, while we do not expect the level of funding that we have had, when you're telling our story beyond Evansville, we have the results to show that what we did worked. And the government should continue to support that.
Amen.
I don't think your mic is on there, so.
My name's Nicole Kennedy, and I'm a parent from Delaware. And we have some awesome teachers there, but I want to commend our principal, who is here tonight, Mr. Todd Slagle. He has been teaching math to the third grade children, and I really think that is awesome.
Question right there.
Hi, my name is Rick. I am a tap master teacher here at Glenwood. And one of the nice things that we have the advantage of having is TAP, which comes from the Teacher Incentive Fund grant. However, and many of our teachers are going to receive an incentive pay for their hard work from last year, which they certainly deserve. But recently in Education Week, there was an article about the federal government making it more rigorous of a grant to apply to schools rather than just using one school. A whole district has to apply TAP in order to be able to use the Teacher Incentive Fund's money. So what is the plan moving forward from that so that not so much money has to be given back to the government because the grant can't be utilized, but rather given to the teachers for whom it was originally intended?
I'm not sure I'm aware. You're saying that, was this TIF 4, Teacher Incentive Fund, that's just ended that competition?
Correct.
And what are you saying, that it restricts the use of TAP to what?
Yeah, the restrictions are now that an entire district has to utilize the system so that all teachers in the district can be part of it rather than just isolated schools in order to pilot the program.
I'm not aware of that. Does anybody else have any?
I'm not aware of that either, but I don't know about the wisdom of piloting a program like that for 1,600 people in a district.
Yeah, I really don't think that's true. I mean, in particular, teacher incentive fund, I'll check on it, okay? The teacher incentive fund has to be targeted in terms of the incentives to the highest poverty schools, for one, so it couldn't be used across all schools in the district, all right? We are trying to support in districts the development through TIF, Teacher Incentive Fund, of some of the practices that you're developing in some of your TIF schools, you know, district-wide systems of professional development evaluation that could expand to others. But that's, I'll check on it and make sure I get your information so I can get back to you on that, okay?
We've talked about teachers and salary. I'll go home and I'll regret if I don't say this. We spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to pay teachers more. And what I see around the world of the nations that are held up in high esteem is they see compensation very differently. They see it as something that undergirds a profession. So I mentioned I was a math teacher, so I was a math major in college. So as I approached the end of college, I have choices. I could go into actuary science, I could go into engineering, accounting, or teaching of mathematics. But the truth is, if I look at those 4 areas, there are huge differences in earning potential. So when college graduates look at that, they say, I'd love to do this, but I'm not willing to make 1/4 or 1/3 as much as something else. In Singapore, in Finland, and all of these countries held in high esteem, what they do is every 3 to 5 years, they do an analysis of the public and the private sector, and they say they don't have to be exactly the same, but we want them comparable. So it takes away that inhibitor that keeps people who may want to go into education from going because their earning power is so much less. And they don't have the problem of recruitment that we do. They get more than they need who want to be in education because that inhibitor is taken away. I think we need to look at that. I'm a believer in honoring teaching as a profession. Joe's heard me say this more times than most. But I always say to people, especially policymakers, that I take it as a personal insult when they think that anyone with a degree in math could do what I do in the classroom. As if just being able to do the problems makes you a teacher. It's just, that's not who we are. And then I always add, I said, if that were true, anyone could teach first grade because the math problems are really easy. And we all know that you can't just have anyone teach first grade. So I think it's so important to honor it as a profession. And it's troubling to me that around the country right now they demean it. And when I was teaching high school, I would have often students say, well, I don't want to teach. And I say, you're kidding. Why not? And I hated it when their answer came back is that they saw it as a profession that didn't really get the respect and esteem it should. We need to change that. We just need to change that. And I want students in high school and elementary and middle school to see that as a viable, important profession. And that it may be something they want to do. And so I think we just have to change that undergirding of what we believe that profession is. And I also believe that people on the outside don't understand the kinds of professional skills and decision-making teachers make every single day, hundreds of times a day. Being able to look into a student's face and know whether they need a hug or a push. Know when they have a question before they ever open their mouths. Understand when kids don't understand and they're not saying a thing. They have to be able to see that and recognize it. Those are professional skills. They can be taught and enhanced, but I believe teaching is more than a science, it's also an art. It's a performing art. I used to be amazed in the summers. I often would take manual labor jobs because it always made me more anxious to go back to teaching. But it always amazed me how more tired I was teaching a day than doing manual labor. It saps every bit of strength and energy out of you. By the end of the day, I used to say to my principal, the least likely time for me to be planning for tomorrow or next week is the first hour after school. I'm pooped. I've just done 5 presentations, and it takes energy. We need to honor what the people do. So I really appreciate the comments from the parent, from the students about how you feel about the people in this building. And I just want to salute all the practitioners in the room, whatever your responsibility as a school. I so admire what you do. And from this one to you, I respect what you do. Thank you.
We want to wrap this up. You've been a very good and patient audience. Is there a final question, comment anybody wants to make? Yes. Can we get a mic out there? Thanks.
Not sure if I need one or not, but well, I wouldn't be me if I didn't ask a question that kind of been popped up on the Twitter feed. And so, because this kind of Twitter is something that I do a lot of and involved in, so I apologize. But anyway, so a lot like the discussion on the back channel, if you go back later and look at the hashtag, you'll see that a lot of people are talking about how data collection and data, even borderline data obsession, really hinders and clogs the learning process. And being out of the classroom for my second year out of the classroom, one thing I have not missed is acuity and this test and that test and every couple of weeks preparing for another test. And everything I've heard tonight is amazing that of all the things we talked about that change education, standardized testing was never listed as something that changes education. So what are we doing and what can we do to reduce the amount of testing that hinders our students and takes away from classroom time? And as a parent, my 4th grader and also my 2nd grader spend way too much time worrying about tests that in the end don't mean very much to me. I'll be honest with you, when my kids' ISEP test, my 3rd grader last took ISEP, when his results came in, Todd, I apologize, my kids go to Delaware, his results came in, my wife said, do you want to look at it? I said, no, I just threw it in the trash. Because to me, that's not learning. What we do in the classroom in the day, that's learning, that's education. So what are we doing and what can we do to reduce the load on teachers with all these tests that clog the learning process?
Well, one thing, and that would sure give us another source of revenue, the billions of dollars that are spent on testing. Obviously, we as teachers, we don't dislike tests. We give them all the time. But they're a different kind. It's an assessment tool to know when a student is learning and when they aren't, and how we can do interventions to help them. I think we have to keep fighting this high stakes, one snapshot, one day of the year. I don't think it gives us the information. And I totally understand why, as a parent, you say, that's not really what's most important to me. I like talking to my son or daughter's teacher. They know far more and tell me what they need or what I could do to assist and all of that. So I think we have to look at that industry to say, how do we change it? And we need good tests that provide feedback to teachers on an ongoing basis. And there is some real development going on where teachers don't wait for months to get the result. That really doesn't help either, especially if you give them to my students this year and we get the results next year. So I think part of the investment is into getting good assessments of student learning that are not high-stakes standardized tests, that give instant feedback to teachers, and it would save a lot of time. It's interesting to me, the development of software to grade writing and themes. Now, some of the early tries were very bad. What's ironic about this is the guy who actually came up with the best model for software that will grade a theme is not in education at all. He was in a totally different field. And when they asked him to keep going on this, he said, no, I just did that for fun. I'm going on to something else. But so we are in a stage of development, different assessment tools than what we're using now that I think will actually be information that will help us meet the needs of students.
I sit on the DOE board regarding the RISE evaluation model, and one of their partners in that is the New Teacher Project. And their hierarchy of reliability of student data is the highest reliability, according to New Teacher Project, is standardized test, and then district-created tests, and then team-created tests, and then the least accurate is the teacher-created test. And each time they present that hierarchy, I insist on telling them that you have that backwards. And any parent will tell you, if you want to know, if you want to measure, is a teacher making growth with a child? What was the conversation with the teacher and the parent on day one, and their conversation with the teacher and the parent on day 180? And measuring what growth did the teacher and parent witness within that child over the course of the entire year. That is the growth that we should be looking for. That is the growth that we should be measuring. And it is certainly the message that I keep insisting with the Indiana Department of Education, that we have to recognize that type of growth.
I won't speak long about assessment other than simply to state a few of my personal beliefs. First of all, I want us to assess. My concern is that it can be denigrated to the extent, because we do assess, we do test, we do test. To your point, Dennis, when you take the assessment and then you don't get it back in a meaningful time frame to where you can actually act upon the data that you receive, then one could question the validity of that. And Susan and I have had conversation about assessments multiple times. What I would love to see us tackle in the TZ is, what assessments do we need to do, and what type of data do we get back? Because I'll tell you this, when I go to my doctor, I don't want him to say, you look like you may have high blood pressure. Why don't you take this? I want him to treat me as a professional with a diagnostic tool and then give me an intervention based on my needs. And I know our professionals, our teachers, should be held to that same expectation too. I think it's really important to measure what matters. Not the number of times we measure, but to measure what matters, and then to do something with that measurement.
Do you have any final comments?
I think they've listened to us for, there's a young man back there who has a question. I hate to continue that. I know he has one. He stood up twice. He's persistent, and that's a good virtue.
My question.
It's on.
You guys is, what do you guys think would be efficient for Glenwood Leadership Academy in the next couple of years?
What was the first part?
Vision?
The vision?
Efficient.
Oh, efficient.
Vision.
I'm sorry. Still can't. Efficient?
Vision.
He is saying vision.
Vision.
Oh.
Vision.
What would
Great.
the vision for Glenwood be in the next couple of years? Then we'll call it an evening.
Well,
You should answer that.
I'll be happy to answer that with, I don't have the answer. You do. Our community does. Our teachers do. You know, one of the things I talk about often is that we need to approach the future with the mindset of the future and not necessarily the vision and the baggage of the past. So we need to make certain that we prepare you for whatever the future holds. We've talked about lifelong learners often, and we've talked about how we incorporate technology. I think I've said it time and time again, we believe so much in technology that we bring technology to the student. There are a lot of schools that think it's still acceptable to take the student to technology, like it's something else, like it's an add-on. It's not an add-on. It is how you will operate for the next 20, 30, 40 years. So the vision for Glenwood will be scripted by your needs, your wants, your desires. And then we need to put a structure and resources in place that will help you meet your dreams.
Our role is to get out of the way. And too often, district leaders want to be the showpiece to what's going on. And it's certainly not the way that we operate. It is investing in the talent that is here, both in the teachers and in the students, and saying, how can we support you? You know what you need. The teachers know what you need. What can we do to make sure that you get what you need and keep that support level there, and then just get out of the way and let the teachers help you fly?
I will say this, though. My vision for you tonight is to go home, do your homework. That's my... There you go.
Can we,
How come all the teachers over here are clapping? So
can we give a hand of thanks to the panel and to the staff? Thank you. Good night.
There was one more comment, I'm sorry.
My name is Janet Leisner. I'm a director of the EVSC Virtual Academy and also a veteran teacher in Evansville. And I do applaud, for instance, the comments of the students of what they can do for teachers. What we see in this corporation, it's because of the leadership that we've always had and the roles that we get to play, is being able to embrace ideas and carry them to the fullest. Dr. Smith mentioned technology in our corporation, and the lady sitting behind me is the Chief Technology Officer. We have embraced technology in this corporation, not just because it's a cool thing to have, but how we can teach students with technology and teach students to use it for instruction. In our virtual academy, we stay very connected to our kids and our parents, and that's the important part. People will say, what's the magic of online? Or just, you've got online classes and the kids can learn. No, the students are learning how to use instruction, but it's because of the connection with my teachers. My kids are emailing me all night, where are you? I need you. It's amazing how we can take technology and make it part of their lives, and I really charge the state and the national level to really look at how we use technology and online classes in a very intentional way, not just throwing it out there for people to use, because the academic integrity of it's very important, and I'm very proud of the support that we've gotten in our city to be able to do that, and that's because of the support that we have from our young teachers, to our veteran people, to our parents who do embrace something like that in our town.
Thank you. Are you applying for the Race to the Top district competition?
Are we applying?
Applying, you're not.
Well, we are.
But you're going to? There's a competition right now underway around how do you use technology to inform and help personalize learning for every student. It's called Race to the Top District Competition, and I'm hopeful that Evansville will apply. So, thank you all, and congratulations on the good work you're doing as an entire community.